No, if not, we'll move on. There's nobody in the public forum, so I'll move on to the confirmation of minutes from the Ōtorohanga District Council dated 30th November 2021. I take it that the councillors have all read the minutes that were on the agenda when it was sent out last week. So I'd like to move that those minutes be accepted. Do we have a seconder for that? Yeah, seconder, Councillor Dow. All in favour? Any corrections of those minutes? Thank you, councillors. Moving on to confirmation of minutes of the Ōtorohanga District Council dated 15th February 2022. Do I have a mover and a seconder for those, please? Move Councillor Jeffries, seconded Councillor Williams. All in favour? Any points and matters arising from those? Yes, Councillor Kloss.
I don't think I'm seeing things, but there was no record of the comments made by councillors in that meeting. Whether that is a new stance or
I believe it's a new stance rather than getting direct quotes from each councillor, just covering the topics in general. That'd be correct, Kai?
Yes.
It's certainly different to the practice we've had in the past, and that there was obviously, so councillors were probably being recognised and acknowledged for voicing the opinions of people in their district to show, I suppose, the support for the people they're representing. I get that, but I think this year's just a real approach we've been trying to get for a number of years to streamline the minute process. So we're covering the points that are necessary, but as we said, not putting anybody accountable to those particular words. Yes, Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, just picking up on what Councillor Kloss has said. Would it be useful, though, to have something along the lines that in response to a question from or in response to a comment from, you don't actually have to say what the content of the question is, but the response can be just part of the
What I might do is hand over to our Chief Executive to explain best practice.
Yeah, kia ora koutou. Have one of you got an example of where that might have you might have wanted the minutes to have reflected something a bit differently? Because we've been doing minutes like this for quite some time, so I'm a bit surprised that the questions have come about. So I'm just wondering what's changed. Is there an example, please?
well, the last meeting I had a bit to say, and other councillors had a bit to say, and when you read the minutes, it went from the topic being presented by the member of staff, and then it goes directly to what the outcome was without showing anything about why the outcome changed. That's all.
I'm trying to find an example because I can see all through here where we've got in response to a query, the library manager replied. In response to a query, councillor's roading manager noted. Members spoke in support of sealing 1 kilometre of Ruiremu Road and the following points were clarified by staff. So I'm trying to find an example of maybe where that wasn't. I guess the danger with putting direct quotes from people is you A, have very, very long minutes, and B, people start focusing on whether they actually were have been quoted accurately or not in the minutes. And so you end up in a bit of a tangle around, I said this, no, I didn't say that. And we record them so we can go back and have a look. But I would, yeah, it'd be good to have an example so that we know where it might. Was there an actual item, Councillor Kloss, that you?
Well, it just jumped out to me because, yes, I did have a lot to say over in one at the last meeting, and it did result in the council voting a different way to what was recommended. And it's just when you read it, it doesn't make sense that what caused the item.
Okay. So Huirimu Road you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that seems strange.
I believe it says in the minutes, though, that the change was bringing the 3-year seal extension budget into one financial year as opposed to spreading it separately over 3 years. So I suppose that's where, through the discussion that there's the decision how it was made. I get your point, though, Councillor. If you read it, you see how did they come to that answer. I suppose if anybody in your district that was concerned, then maybe there would be a question that they may pose back to you on the phone. Yeah.
To me, it just sounds like politics has been involved in this.
I can assure you that there's no politics involved in the minutes. What happens with the minutes is they're drafted by the committee secretary and then they're given to the leadership team member who is responsible for that particular committee or council or community board. In that case, it's me, and I review them. So they don't go anywhere near an elected member at all. Max doesn't get to see the minutes. No one gets to see the minutes. So I think maybe what you're asking is for a paragraph to be inserted that maybe I would suggest isn't verbatim what you said on the day, but that you were advocating for the recommendations to be changed.
Yep.
Is that what, would that help?
That would make more sense of the minutes.
Yep, okay. So how about we draft something and we can send it to everyone and you can let us know whether that's appropriate.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Can I just raise,
Councillor Dow.
sorry. Now that we're live streaming and it's getting recorded, so is that going to be kept as a record forever, sort of the minutes, or well, obviously it's the paper-based one, not an email one. So, say if I, for instance, wanted to look up, I could go and get the video of the YouTube recording. So is that like in the government? Like, can that be held somewhere forever, every day? Sort of like, I know you can go on YouTube, but
Yeah, through you.
and then yeah, sorry, yeah, just-
Yeah, I think they will be there for ever and ever. Yeah, yes.
So, yeah, to answer that question, I suppose, so anybody who was actually interested in how the conversation went, then yes, they could view the live stream of the council meeting to find out.
Yes. And through you, Your Worship, I still think it's important that we make sure we have our own record of the meeting, actually reflecting the what happened. And so I'm happy with the support of everyone in the room to redraft this part and put an extra paragraph in.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, moving on to the receipt of minutes of the Kawhia Community Board dated 25th of February 2022. Do I have a mover and a second for the move? Councillor Jeffries. I'll second that. All in favour?
Aye.
Nothing from those. Receipt of the minutes of the Ōtorohanga Community Board dated 3rd of February 2022. Do you have a mover and a second for those? That move Councillor Dow. Second Councillor Christensen. All in favour? Right, thank you. Moving on to my verbal report. Councillors, following our last council meeting on Wednesday the 16th, I had a Zoom meeting with asking for my feedback and insights on the council market report that was done on us a couple of years ago, and where they felt I thought there's any shortcomings or what can be improved and what use it was to us as a council. So that was an interesting hours conversation about council market going forward. I had a meeting in here the following day, actually the same day, sorry, about the possibility of a new industry coming into our district, that they're still in discussion. On the 18th, I went down to Tikawiti to the Maru Trust Expo, which was really good. And the Maru Trust was really offering support to families where they could make quite significant savings in their power usage in their house, and that there's using low energy light bulbs, shower heads, restricted shower heads and the likes. And I think it came out with the calculations with me, I could save up to $700 a year if I followed all the correct protocols. There's some families that they're talking to that there's up to $2,500 a year savings with just implementing a few changes. And probably one of the biggest ones is getting your teenagers out of the shower within a couple of minutes. So if you've got a big family and a lot of usage, then that's where your power bill's going. We had a meeting concerning the subdivision in town on the 21st, went to the museum exhibition on the 23rd, which is the history of Ōtorohanga around the surrounding districts, which is really cool. Got to view the old bridge across the Waipa River at Te Heroa, which used to hear rattle as a kid when I was growing up. So there's a lot of fond memories kind of come flooding back when you see some of those pictures and looking at the town and the history of it. It did actually end up being a COVID cluster event. So I think everybody had to go and get checked up after that evening. Wednesday, the 24th and 25th, I was down in Wellington doing some work with the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs, and then I had a Zoom meeting down there on the Rural Water Scheme Working Group that same day. On March the 1st, I had a meeting with the executive of Happy Valley Nutrition, another subdivision update on the 2nd. I chaired the Waikato Plan Youth Training and Education Group on the 3rd of this month. We had 3 hours of rural provincial on the 4th, which is a bit of a change from the 1.5 days it normally is, or the 1 day. Yeah, but you can only really do about 3 hours of concentrated Zoom before you start wandering or finding something else to do. Then I had a Three Waters Technical Working Group meeting on the 10th, and I've got another one coming up in another few days' time. So that Rural Water Scheme Technical Working Group, our meetings now about fortnightly, and the last meeting was about the rural water schemes and the ownership and who's governing those. And there's no transfer of ownership in private water schemes. That's the first thing. So the ownership stays with the water schemes. It's how and who they're accountable to the water regulations in Te Mata Arawai and how compliant they are. So there's a lot of work to be done in that space. The last meeting we had was more about Papakainga and Marae and how we get them up to speed and who funds them and how they're funded in 5 and 10 years' time. It's all very well getting the drinking water standards there now, but to stay compliant through the coming years is the real challenge. And the challenge here is probably financial as much as anything. But a lot of work still to be done. I think the big thing we've got to take into account is, much as Te Mata Arawai has come in as the water regulator, they're not rushing to get things done. They'll be focused on those water schemes that are registered already, and then it's about getting the other 74,000 schemes registered, and then on scale working through the process. So it's going to be many years in the work to get that across the line. So I'd like to move that my report be received. Secretary Councillor Ferguson, all in favour? Any questions? Yes, Councillor.
Just in relation to the rural schemes and the ownership of them, and that they're owned by the various areas. But in reality, because they're on private land, they're actually owned by the farmers. And it's a really good example in the Arena one where owner of the land actually declined to have something happen. What is going to happen, what happened. And so the ownership actually is not with just with the council or the even the committee. It is still owned by private individuals. And that's going to be an issue that has to be worked through.
Oh, look, it's going to be a major issue, and I think the big thing, like for us with NTDB has no desire at this point to take ownership, and I'm sure Mark will jump in and correct me if I'm wrong at any point in this, of those particular rural water schemes. It's where the accountability is in complying with the water regulator in Te Mata Arawai. And so it could be the water regulator that those water schemes are answering to, not the water regulator, it could be the entity that those water schemes are answerable to, or they may choose to go off and do things themselves. The big issue there is they still have to be answerable to the drinking water standards in Te Mata Arawai as the regulator.
So it is workable. I see it. It could be workable.
It can be workable. Yeah.
Through you, Your Worship, Mark might correct me, but my understanding is that the infrastructure on the farmers' properties is not owned by that farmer of the property. It's owned by the water scheme, and there are instruments in place, I'm imagining, easements, leases, licenses to occupy, that give the water scheme the right to have their infrastructure actually located on that farm. But I don't think that that's in question and dispute here. It is the end product that's coming out of it. It's the water that Taumata Arawai. Now that we've cleared up that the entities aren't going to take over the infrastructure, it's really what's coming out at the end that we need to be concerned about. But I think we've got a whole range of instruments in place to give us access to land at the moment to maintain water supply infrastructure and that, correct?
Yeah, correct. There's varying degrees of, I suppose, mechanisms in place.
Have you got easements?
Some have easements, some don't. Some have compensation certificates, some have sort of other sort of, I suppose, MOUs.
Excuse me, can I ask the both of you just to bring your mics a wee bit closer to yourself? I'm sure those on the screen challenge.
I just asked if there were easements in place.
Is without knowing exactly every single property owners, I would say there's probably not a lot of easements in place. That's something we have been working on when we have come up against renewals, is putting those mechanisms in place. But I think if you look back in history to how the schemes were built, it was done as a cooperative sort of process, and those sort of things weren't put in place back then. I think moving forward, we are definitely trying to put some better legalisation around where the plants sit, some boundaries, but there's all sorts of varying degrees of agreement out there. So, it's not, there's plenty of challenges.
Yes, it can't be ignored though over time.
I think there's other things, just to go further, there's the rural water scheme terms and conditions, which also gives level of process around council's access to infrastructure and those sorts of agreements placed.
Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Mark. Yes, Councillor Jeffries.
Just one quick question, Your Worship, about Happy Valley, and what's the latest situation with them?
Latest situation with Happy Valley is I had a meeting with them. They have slowed things down a wee bit. They just reappointed a new chief executive for Happy Valley. They have at this stage organising one of their potential funders to come over and look at the site concern, because there's obviously COVID's caused a few issues in terms of logistics getting around the world, because any investor is an offshore investor in this particular case. So they're still confident that the factory will go ahead, but probably the original timelines have been pushed out a year. So there's no reason to suspect or think otherwise that it's fallen over. Yes, Councillor
Could
Kloss.
I ask about the meeting you went to about something Mark, I've forgotten if you
Oh, sorry, the Council Mark meeting?
Council Mark. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
And
So,
what is, yeah.
so in terms of the feedback they wanted from Council Mark, what were my thoughts on it? Where are our benefits and so on? So I said, where we were challenged probably is being compared straight away to other councils through the scoring mechanism that they used, where we saw other councils around the country that were absolutely dysfunctional in terms of their governance and or management, but they got potentially a higher mark than what we did. And I didn't feel that was just in terms of their scoring. But I think once we got over the emotion of the initial score, the benefits for us are absolutely huge in terms of how we reframed and reorganised the council itself. So I think there's huge benefit in return for us. And I think in terms of where the council mark does benefit is purely in that area. It's not about comparing us with other councils. It's about structural change where necessary.
Yeah, through your worship, just to add to that, so we have it on the schedule to do an update at after the next council meeting on Council Mark and where we're at with our implementation plan. So yeah, especially with now that we've got some new roles in place, because we had to put a whole lot of things on hold pending new appointments. So it's exciting because we can crank on and get some other things done.
I suppose there's two things coming out of it, and it may change considerably with the future of local government being looked at the moment. So, yeah, as I said, a lot of the our connections with the community were highlighted and absolutely lacking in the council, Mark, which obviously that they've made big changes for us when we were going out for consultation of a long-term plan, but also have major impacts depending on what the delivery of local government is in the coming times. But I think, yeah, having that independent lens coming in was absolutely paramount in giving us the confidence to make change. Yeah. Thank you. Right, we'll move on. No further discussion, councillors? Okay, moving on to item 235, the financial report for the month ending 28th February 2022. I'll hand over to Brendan and Mark. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I will take the report as having been read and just sort of highlight some of the key things. So as we say in the executive summary, operating revenues down a bit to the end of February, due in part to our NZTA subsidies and also just other income. Capital expenditure and loan repayments are under budget, mostly to do with the timing. A lot of the capital expenditure is happening sort of now for the next few months. In terms of balance sheets, we're in a healthy position at the end of February. Helped a lot, I guess, by the fact that the second rates instalment was due at the end of February, so cash went up. Also, trade and other receivables are up. So I'll just, on that, I had some questions come through from Councillor Jeffries yesterday before the meeting, so I'll just go through those. So he asked why trade and other receivables was up by 2.8 million on budget. So the budget's at the end of the year. As it's only a full year budget, you don't budget balance sheets month by month. You can, but we don't. So the reason why that's a lot higher is obviously the second installment's been processed now. A lot of people paid that already by the end of February, but there's still people on direct debits and automatic payments that will pay it off before the end of the year. So we should get closer to that full year budget by the end of the year, probably. And the other one on the balance sheet he asked about was the trade and other payables being down to over 2 million. So again, that's more a timing issue. There's a lot of accruals we do at year end for expenses that come in after the fact that relate to this year. We don't do those during the year, obviously, because it's just not worth the hassle, really. So we only did the year end for financial purposes. So that's why that's down on budget. There was a question on the comprehensive revenue and expenses. There was a question why other income was 45% down. So I had explained subsidies and grants, but not the other income. So there's a couple of items in there. One is around the flood protection income that we get from Waikato Regional. So we only invoice that at the end of the year. So that's not in there, obviously. That's about 120,000 a year, something like that. There's timing around regulatory income, particularly some of the stuff around Waikaria. So we obviously budget for regulatory building income this year with the Waikaria work. Waikaria is being invoiced sort of in groups, so they're not doing constant invoicing because they're spending so long having a process. They sort of do a whole heap and then lump them. And they've just done a whole heap of invoices at the start of March, so they will report the end of February figures. So that gets us a little closer as well. And then the other question that I had, or that was sent to me, was around the combined cost of service statement. And so that's related to the community development and why we're $345,000 over budget, which is the only operating expenditure we're over budget year to date. So that is to do with the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs MSD funding. So when we were doing the LTP budget for this year, at that point it was only 1 year, I believe, the project. They added another year after that, so we've paid obviously the 500,000 onto ODDB for the year, and we've received income. So you'll see activity revenues. That's part of that income in there. So there's offset income. So it's not an expense to us, but it does apply for our own budget because we didn't budget for having to spend that money in the first place. So that's it with the financial side of things. Then I guess Mark can do the capital. If there's any questions about the financials first.
Any questions on the financials, councillors? Thank you for that, Brendan. Hand over to you, Mark.
Good morning, councillors, worship. The capital project update for the end of February is in front of you, and I'll take it as read, and I'll just look through a couple of things, and I think probably from the last report, there hasn't been a lot of movement as far as spending, but I think there's been plenty of movement on progress with a couple of our major projects. So if we look down through into the tables, probably the best place to get a really good idea of how we're tracking. You'll see that we're nearing completion for a lot of our roading contracts for this financial year, and we're on track to complete those within the term. Moving down into the stimulus funding, we've got 6 out of the 8. You'll see that I've written down there, but I can actually say that we'll probably have 7 out of the 8 completed by the end of this month, which is really good. So the TRR Rising Water Main, although the physical works won't be completed, the portion of funding from the stimulus fund will be completed for that project, and we'll carry on with our portion of that, which is council funded. So that's really positive. And the Gorikau water treatment upgrade, we're just finalising that contract now. So that's on track to be completed by June 30, which is a really, really good, and it, quite positive considering the 12, 18 months we've worked in around that extra capital funding. The 3 water projects in itself are tracking along really well. The couple of key ones in there that have probably moved more in the last week since this report was done is the TRR APG filter has now been awarded, and that's scheduled to be built between probably May and June. It'll be fabricated off site, so it'll turn up as one piece. So the actual build on site is not a lot. The hasn't been any further changes on the Hurungu Taupaki consolidation project, but we're looking at other options there currently on how we can sort of progress that. Just moving down there, the others are all sort of just sort of moving along, which is good. We're the water main renewal project, co-project with Waipaha District Council is now out to tender, and we should see those come in early April, ready for award, and I'll be bringing a report to council for that award in May. And that's, yeah, I think that's a pretty good overview. I'm here to take some further questions rather than continue talking. That's fine.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome, Mark. Thanks for that. Hey, loving the table as well. It's really clear and just makes it easy for us. Just on the top and under roading, the unsealed road metalling complete for 21-23. Does that mean there's no more road metalling throughout 22 and 23?
So complete for 21-22. Sorry, have I written that wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry. So I need a clarification on. Thank you.
Yes. No, that's a good, nice pick up there, Max. Yep, that's wrong.
Okay.
It's a 3-year program. Yeah. Sorry.
All good. Any questions, councillors? All good.
Just a comment from
Yes.
me, just now that I'm reading this again, it might be good to include the value of the projects in that table, do you reckon? Be useful, because some of them are kind of,
Significant.
pretty significant amounts of money, and it'd be nice for council to just see, where that program that you approved in the long-term plan, how the dollars look.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, you could probably get that from those Gantt
Yes.
charts up there, but
Yeah.
it's quite hard to
Yes.
sort of work it out. So if I can run another table down the side or another
Just
column.
another column would be great, thank you.
Just either Brendan or Mark on this one. With the 3 water stimulus through the DIA, do we invoice them as these projects are being finished or completed, or are they paying up front? How does that work?
So they initially gave us half the money, which was 1.25 million. And then once that was done, then we started invoicing for the stuff as completed.
Thank you.
So not quite the, obviously, there's a couple of projects that will go.
And going on the timeframes and the work that's actually been done, obviously procurement wasn't an issue or hasn't been a major issue.
I think it's always been a factor. Luckily, we got moving on a couple of those bigger projects early. The procurement for the Kora cow was probably been our biggest challenge. And luckily we've awarded a contractor that's said they'll meet our deadlines of June 30, which is really good. But the rest of it seems to have flowed on quite well. But we probably haven't taken on big logistical nightmares, which is key. So
I think just to add to that, you'll recall that one of the resolutions that council made when we adopted the program for the stimulus money was to waive some of our procurement processes. And it's not to say that we haven't run procurement processes, but we've just been a lot more nimble with it and be able to be really responsive to the contractor market out there. And I just, you know, I want to credit the team in times of enormous change. And team, I mean wider group, because Mark and Graham, Brendan, the finance team and the assets and engineering team have worked together to make sure that we've been able to deliver these projects in real uncertain times. So it's a real credit to them.
Yeah. No, thanks, Tanya. Yeah, certainly share those words. It has been good to see. And there's actually another thing that was raised in council, Mark, wasn't it? It was our issues with procurement, that it was just holding us up in terms of getting work done. So the fact this has come to fruition is really cool. Brendan, Mark, thanks for those reports. It's really cool. As I said, I'm enjoying the table and see what's going on. And I agree with Tanya, it'd be nice to see some costings next to it. And sorry, Councillor Jeffries has a question.
Oh, thank you, Tanya. Yes, through you, Your Worship, Mark. I think Tanya has pretty much covered it, but can you just, are you quite comfortable that the availability of contractors is such that that there's no problems in your mind that we're going to actually achieve completion of these contracts by 30 June? We never.
It's really hard to predict that, Councillor. I mean, I'm comfortable that we're moving forward. Things can change weekly. We've set those sort of goals, and if I was to sit here and say I will definitely have everything finished by the 30th of June, I probably wouldn't be fair a comment. That's what we're aiming for. That's what we're striving for. And if we get close to that, I think we're very pleased. It's a changing environment. We adjust every week, and I think we just stay focused on that's our goal. Deal with those challenges as they come along.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Tanya?
Yes, through you, Worship. I think I've said this before, that we are no longer probably able to have a capital works program that starts on the 1st of July one year and finishes on the 30th of June the next year. We're looking at it more like a 3-year program now, and that's in line with firstly our long-term plan, but secondly our funders. A lot of them fund on a 3-year basis now, and so I think our mindset around carry forwards are bad probably needs to change. And even my own mindset has been like that. When the long list comes to council, it's been like, oh, this looks really bad. But actually we want to be signalling through this report, and that's what we're doing, that there will be some things that carry over, and that's not a bad thing. That's deliberate, it's planned, and it's about being, as we've said, nimble and responsive to the external market. Yeah.
Thank you, Tanya. If there's no further questions, we have a resolution that the financial report, including the capital projects update for the month ending 28 February 2022, be received. Move Councillor Jeffries, second Councillor Williams. All in favour? Aye. Carried. Thank you. Moving on now, at this stage, I think Nadia is running down the stairs. Item 236, the 6-month report from Hamilton Waikato Tourism. My goodness. Hello, Nadia. Thanks, Brendan. Thanks, Mark. Nadia, welcome. I believe this is your first report to council.
Kia ora koutou. Yes, Your Worship, this is my first report to council. So, So the report gives a brief overview of Hamilton and Waikato tourism targets, the other participating local authorities, and also Council's financial commitment for the next 3 years through the long-term plan 21. Attached is the Hamilton Waikato Tourism 6-monthly report for the period 1 July 21 to end of December 21. You may have noted that there's a departure of the Chief Executive, Jason Dawson, and there is an interim GM of Nicole Greenwell. While the attached report captures activities across all of the participating territories, pages 53 and 54 highlighted Ōtorohanga accommodation data, and on pages 56, the report notes the RTO's media advertising of specific places and businesses within our district. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Nadia. I mean, it's an interesting time, and it was good to see those Ōtorohanga stats in there. Absolutely. Quite an amazing amount of spend still. I was surprised in the domestic market across the country, certainly across the Waikato. And it's good to see, I think, if I remember correctly, the Ōtorohanga occupancy figures were slightly up on what the Waikato average was, which was also very good to see. Councillor, is there any questions of Nadia? Councillor Jeffries.
Good morning. Through you, Your Worship. Morning, Nadia. Just a quick question under the heading commercial accommodation in Ōtorohanga. It says that Ōtorohanga has 9 commercial accommodation providers, but this is probably an unfair question. Does that include just Ōtorohanga, or is it the district, including Kawhia?
Through you, Your Worship, I don't know the definite answer to that, but I'm happy to come back to you.
Thank you.
Answer.
Yep, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? Nothing further. Yes, interesting. We normally have, obviously when Jason was the Chief Executive, turning up to these meetings, but I think we all read through that, again, a comprehensive 6-monthly report. Great having you here presenting to us, and I'm sure there'll be many more opportunities. So thanks, Nadia. So we have the 2 resolutions in front of us. First resolution is receive the report, 6-month report from Hamilton Waikato Tourism from Nadia Gower, Group Manager Strategy and Community, and receive the Hamilton and Waikato Tourism 6-monthly report to Ōtorohanga District Council dated 1 July to 31st December 2021. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Seconder, Councillor Dow. All in favour? Carried. Thank you, Nadia. Moving on to item 237, the CoLab Draft Statement of Intent 2022-23 and half-yearly report to 31st December 2021. Ross will be speaking to that, and I'm sure Tanya will at some stage as well. Oh, there's Ross. Sorry, Ross is looking at the door, not at the screen. Welcome.
Morena koutou, Your Worship, Morena councillors. This report has 2 components to it. The first, and perhaps the most substantive, is your consideration of the draft statement of intent for the 2022-23 year for CoLab, and the second item is the 6-monthly report to 31 December 2021. So as a shareholding council of CoLab, which is the trading name of Waikato Local Authority Shared Services, you have an opportunity to provide comment on the statement of intent, which will go back to the directors of the board, and that's your way of influencing the direction of the company. I think the statement of intent's reasonably clear. It sets out a pathway and a focus for the coming 12 months, which is largely the maintenance of CoLab's base services and the continued development of projects already underway. I think it's reasonable to accept that, like many other businesses, CoLab has equally been challenged by the changing nature of the environment that it and its shareholding councils have been working in over the last year or so, and that uncertainty and that change and those challenges are going to continue for the foreseeable future. So, Your Worship, I don't wish to cover anything further in the statement of intent, but happy to take any questions that councillors may have.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. It was certainly a comprehensive report. In terms of the statement of intent, there's nothing in there that raised any alarm bells for me. There's nothing that you see from the statement of intent that Ōtorohanga District Council would have any issues with?
No, I don't, Your Worship, and I see continued opportunity for our council and our community to continue to benefit through association and shareholding membership of CoLab.
So thanks, Ross. I was talking with Tanya this morning about it as well, and I suppose in terms of the different work streams and Ōtorohanga's appetite to be a part of, that we have the freedom and the autonomy to choose where we want to participate and where we don't. But in saying that, working collaboratively with the other councils is imperative to gain the efficiencies out of CoLab going forward. So yeah, it's good to be as part of it, certainly when it comes to working together, because I think there's a lot that we can learn off other councils. And in terms of what we do, I'm sure other councils are learning off us as well. I hope so. I know Tony wants to speak to about Councillor Kloss.
I may have been asleep, but is this the first time we have had such a comprehensive report from this entity?
No, you haven't been asleep, but as Tanya will explain.
Through you, Your Worship, good spotting, Councillor Kloss. We perhaps haven't been as diligent as we might have been with bringing statements of intent in that to Council. And you'll notice that in the message from the Chair in the CoLab statement of intent, number one, our challenges are twofold. Number one, the abilities of councils to make staff available to work with CoLab in progressing opportunities at pace that meets Council's expectations. So through the realignment process, we have increased our capacity and capability in this area. Ross is very much involved in the shared services. I mean, we all are in some way, but I've given Ross specific kind of responsibility around making sure that council gets to see items like this, and that we also have the ability to robustly analyse any opportunities that come our way. We've just all been too busy. So it's good to have that kind of headroom and as a leadership team to be able to work together with Ross's advice on what opportunities we want to take and which ones just aren't going to add value to us. So yeah, good spotting there about that.
Could I ask if it includes the work that was done around the Waikato plan?
You can ask the question, I don't know who's going to answer it. No, it's nothing to do with what goes on in the Waikato plan to answer that question.
So that has disappeared into the ether.
The Waikato plan still has many facets to it, which are totally separate to what Waikato LAS or CoLab does.
And the cost to Ōtorohanga District Council being part of this?
So on a per capita basis, what that is?
Ross, do you have a figure? It depends what, there's a base amount for every council, and then we pay on a population kind of formula basis for the services. Is that correct?
Yes, but I'm sorry, I don't have that top of head, but we can certainly get that information and circulate it.
Look, thanks, Ross. There's no question that we benefit from having you on the team here to assist on this journey with CoLab, which was obviously known prior as Waikato LAS. Tanya has something more to say.
Well, just one more thing. You'll notice that just further down that page of the message from the Chair, he's highlighted 3 projects that are currently CoLab is currently working on. So the first one, the Learning Development Shared Service Project, is one that I'm sponsoring. So I've been heavily involved in the establishment and ongoing evaluation of this. So you'll see the commentary there is a great opportunity to leverage council investment to improve the capability of our staff. We estimate the benefit to be $2.4 million in savings across the region in the first 3 years. So that's sharing a learning and development platform across all of the councils rather than us all providing training to our staff in similar areas. So really exciting project with lots of potential. Yeah.
Thank you, Tanya. Anything further, councillors? Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you, Worship. Tanya, you just touched on a question that I had there, and that was have the areas of council's activities that are going to be developed for common training, have they been identified, or is it just right across all activities?
Yes, they have through your worship. So Kylie has been involved in a little group of staff across the councils that have agreed to some low-hanging fruit, as we call them, that can be kind of picked straight away to deliver training online for, and then there's kind of bands above that that gets into more and more complexity. And I guess the final kind of area in the leadership development space, because every CE likes to put their own flavour on that. So we'll see whether we can get some common ground there as well. But yeah, certainly I think there's a half a dozen training courses to start with, and then they'll progress from there.
That sounds great. So there'll be a degree of uniformity across great. Just one other quick question in terms of the procurement. Are we going to be involved with this in terms of our own procurements? Does that include the likes of roading, for example, and bundling up contracts across
Ross,
different
you're
authorities?
aware of the procurement project?
Only to the extent, through your worship, that we have used the template, the regional procurement template that's been developed by CoLab. So we have a consistent approach to procurement. Mark may have some more specific details around the assets and roading, but certainly there's an opportunity for us to step into the shared consultant procurement space, and it's certainly our intention to do that.
Thanks, Ross. Mark, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, just briefly off the top of my head, there's a couple of things that we get the option to be included in when it comes to procurement. And one of them is currently our CCTV condition assessments, and we're working on that currently with looking at a bigger package deal. So my experience so far has been we don't have to do everything, but we get the option to be included in everything. So it works out really well.
Just, Mark, a question from me. Like when back with Waikato Lass, as we remember it, I mean, Rata was probably one of the early players in Waikato Lass or CoLab now. Is there any procurement opportunities through Rata, or is that just all around technology?
It seems to be more centred around asset management, and it's probably been more focused. The Rata roading side is working really well, and we're trying to develop the Rata water side, which has been an ongoing process probably over the last 18 months. And so there's definitely opportunities there, but it's more around the asset management, is my understanding, Your Worship.
No, thanks, Mark. Certainly, I was aware that you're doing the work with the waters around the Rata model, or based off the Rata model, that there would potentially all change depending on what entity B does, I'd imagine, in terms of the asset management as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? If not, we have three parts to the resolution. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Ross. Three parts to the resolution. As the council received the report, CoLab draft statement of intent 22-23 and half yearly report to 31st December 21, received the CoLab half yearly report for a period ending 31 December 2021, and received the draft CoLab statement of intent for 2022-23 and endorses the direction set therein, subject to the following feedback, which there was none, for the company's board of directors. We have moved on a seconder for that. Move Councillor Kloss, second Councillor Jeffries. All in favour? Carried. Happy birthday to Ross.
Thank you, Worship.
Okay, moving on to item 238, planning report for October 2021 to December 2021. I believe Andrew is speaking to that. Is Andrew in the room, or is Andrew on the screen? Andrew's on this. No, Marion's there. Coming from everywhere. Welcome, Andrew. Morning, Andrew. Right, turn on your mic. Thank you.
Yes, so starting with the planning report for the last quarter of the calendar year 2021, I'd take the report as read, brief as it is. The mathematicians amongst you would have noticed the obvious flaw in the one paragraph that the report contains. Last year, in the same period of, 2 years ago, the same period of 2020, there were 20 consents issued. So it just shows that we had a busy year last year, despite all the interruptions from the pandemic. Are there any questions?
Any questions, councillors? Pretty straightforward. I see that Kawhi Te Hura numbers being up there, and I assume that is all on Pokeroo Road with all the work that's going on there at the moment.
It's just generally the area, the northern part of the district there seems to be very popular.
No further questions, councillors, on the planning report. So we have resolutions received the planning report for October 21 to December 21. Report from Andrew Lowe, Group Manager, Regulatory and Growth. I'd like to move that. Do I have a seconder? Seconder, Councillor Dow. All in favour? Aye. Carried. Tanya.
Through you,
To
Worship,
Sam.
I just wondered whether we wanted to give them an update on where plan change one,
Plan
two,
change one. Yes.
plan change one is at. It's still alive. And yeah, we've had some movement happen just in the last week, haven't we? So that's why it's not in this report.
Well,
But
thanks, Tanya.
it
And I,
might be useful to just
Yeah.
update.
Yes, so I suppose just a bit of history here. Our engagement with Plan Chain 1 goes back to the last triennium, and members, councillors that were part of our previous council will remember we actually had a consultant come in and we made a submission to that plan change. So the strategy all along was to engage in the process so that we had a chance to influence the proceedings. It's coming to the sharp end now, and the focus of our initial submission has been narrowed down to point source discharges, which means places where businesses or organisations discharge large amounts of waste or treated water into the rivers or into water bodies within the Waikato catchment. That includes us, primarily our wastewater discharge, the Mongorongo stream. And so the focus of most of the district councils in the city, Hamilton City, has been around these point source discharges. And so we've kind of been we've been lumped in with a whole lot of other issues around discharge to water and water purity and clarity and et cetera. But over the last week, we've managed to, I suppose, chisel out an opportunity to have the one matter of point source discharges heard by the judge and put down for mediation with the regional council. So that's an advancement. It means that there's, and we kind of get to the bit that has meaning for us, and it may get resolved, and then we'll be out of the conversation and all the ongoing other big issues that are facing them around fertiliser levels and overseer, and how do you look after people that are doing market gardens up in Pukekohe, and how does that tie in with someone growing maize down Taupo, and all the anomalies and contradictions that this thing has got within it. I'm sure they will go on, but our little part will be finished.
thanks, Andrew. So, okay, that part's finished. All those other points you mentioned, like change of land use and all that as well. So that is still just in the melting pot at the moment.
Still very much live. It's a very organised lobby of agricultural interests that are making their voice heard. But, yeah.
Watch the space. So yes, Councillor Jeffries.
Through you, Worship. Andrew, does that land change thing, does that include the planting of, say, pine forests?
I don't know what you have.
Okay. Just, did you know if it includes, though,
I think
the
basically,
runoff from?
no, what it means is that if you want to change your land use to a land use that is more intensive in the way that it creates discharge or effects that will affect the water, then it's likely that there'll be some sort of consent process around that. Those are the rules that are being discussed at the moment.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Kloss.
Well, therefore I have to ask if chicken farming is part of it.
Sorry.
I therefore have to ask if chicken farming is, or
Uh,
it's eggs, isn't it? It's
I
eggs.
don't think that operation required consent from the regional council.
Just, following up on your point about pines, Councillor Jeffries, you may, I don't know if you're privy to the conversation which Minister Nash had about the planting of forestry for not being harvested, and that there will change legislation at the end of the year. Thank you. Yeah. Now, obviously the government saw the loophole in the system, or the problem with the system, that you're having pine trees that after 100 years will all fall over and create major issues, so that there's now been something which isn't available to mainly the offshore carbon credit buyers. Yeah. Councillor Williams, you're looking? No? Okay. Well, good. So moving on then, Andrew, while you're still here, to item 239, Animal Control Officer's report for October through December 2021.
Yes, once again, the final quarter of last year, I just asked the report taken as read. There's nothing particularly stands out there, apart from the fact that the animal control officer wasn't able to carry out a lot of property visits due to just due to the restrictions imposed through the pandemic, and but nevertheless, he still had quite a few dog complaints, and that's the usual kind of animal control stuff that you get. Yeah. Happy to take any questions.
Cool, thanks, Andrew. Have those two dogs that went AWOL, have they been caught up with yet or not?
They're still out there somewhere.
Thank you.
Through you,
Yes,
Your
Councillor
Worship.
Jeffries.
Through you, Your Worship. Andrew, what's the current situations regarding those horses that are continually roaming around on Aotea? There's no mention of that in the report here.
So the current situation is that we are continuing to work with both of the property owners that have got fences on the escape route, try and get further improvements made there. And that I was advised last week that the fencing hadn't all been completely reinstated after the forestry block had been harvested there. So hopefully that will be completed shortly.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay, we have the resolution that we received the Animal Control Officer's report for October 2021 to December 2021. Report from Andrew Lowe, Group Manager, Regulatory and Growth. Do I have a move and a second for that? Move Councillor Christensen, second Councillor Ferguson. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Moving on to item 240, application for temporary road closure, Targa New Zealand 2022. See Mark's walking in. Marion was on the screen, but I'm going that Mark is the new Marion.
Should be online.
I'm here. Hello. Can everybody
Hi,
hear
Marion.
me?
Welcome. Yes, we've got you.
Oh,
I'll hand over to you.
thank you. Good morning, Your Worship, Tanya and councillors. I've received another application for a temporary road closure from Targa New Zealand. Hopefully, well, you all have a copy of it, of course. Plus, with the roads that they're going to impact on, it's part and parcel of their national, rally that they have, and it involves a lot of councils. So this is actually, while they're a closure, also so Waitomo and Waipa at the same time, plus a lot of other councils as well, because they're trying to get it to all sort of follow day by day down New Zealand, through New Zealand. It's not as interactive as it usually is, purely because of COVID. Usually they come into the community, they have big sausage sizzles in the car park, etc. They give kids rides in the rally cars and what have you, but COVID has taken that from them, so it's all pretty low key and out in the back blocks. The usual conditions are imposed. Condition 1 changes quite regularly. The last time, I think it was just last weekend, the rally that they completed was under the traffic light, still under the traffic light framework. This one is under the protection framework, or the traffic, the level system was last May, yeah. This one is through the traffic light protection system. So it still doesn't allow them to come and have, big interaction with the community, but there is still quite a following that they do have. And as you can see by the map, it is as per usual in the outer roads, and they're currently seeking permission from the adjoining district councils as we go into this meeting.
Awesome. Thank you, Marion. Any questions of Marion, councillors? To me, it's a fairly straightforward request for a road closure for Targarelli. As you said, Marion, it works through with Waipa going on down through Waitomo as well. So, yeah, I think this would be nice to see that level of continuum rather than skipping Ōtorohanga on the way through. Any questions? No questions from the councillors, Marion. So thank you very much for the report. Let's hope it, working with Targa goes very smoothly, as I'm sure Wallam has done in the past. So we have a resolution here, which I'm not going to read it all out, but it goes in two parts, part A and part B, and part B has got 11 points to that. So it's receiving the application for temporary road closure, Target New Zealand 22 report from Aaron Fleming, Senior Engineering Assistant Manager. And also the second part then is grant the application for temporary road closure on sections of Lerman, Paewhenua, Maihihi, Toroa, Otiwa, why do I start this? Waimahora, Barber, Rangitoto, Tahia Bush, Thompson, Pururui, West and East, and Ngāpiki roads. And my apologies to anybody if I got any of those pronunciations wrong. Do I have a mover and a seconder for those, please? Move Councillor Ferguson, seconded Councillor Christensen. All in favour? Aye. Cheers. Thank you, Marion. Good luck.
Very much, guys. Cheers.
Right. Sorry, moving on to item 241, order of candidate names on voting papers for the local authority elections 2022. Graham.
Thanks. Yeah, good morning, everyone. So as you all know, it's election year this year, and one of the requirements under the Electoral Act is that we council passes a resolution on the nature of order of candidates' names on our voting papers. So there are 3 different ways that the candidates' names can be ordered. They can be in alphabetical order, they can be in what's called pseudo-random, or they can be in random. So there's been, I guess, research over the years that, particularly in local government elections, that those that have surnames that sit at the beginning of the alphabet get, particularly if their surname starts with A or B.
I hadn't noticed any favouritism out there at all.
They stand to get more votes. So the resolution that I'm looking for is that we adopt random method of allocating candidates' names. Of course, it doesn't really matter if there's only one candidate. So, but if there are multiple candidates, there's no additional cost to that. Our electoral officer has the software that will generate random names.
Thank you, Graham. Personally, I see no reason to change the current model that we've got, which is at random. Makes sense. Then once again, you can't be accused of any favouritism at all, which is really important in the electoral cycle. Any questions, councillors? No.
Everyone in this room, except for Councillor Williams, is at the first half of the alphabet. So yeah, just
and I'm right at the start of it. Okay. So thanks, Graham. We have two parts to it. Receive the 2022 local body elections candidate order of names report from Graham Bunn, Deputy Electoral Officer, is accepted and resolved in accordance with Section 31 of the Local Electoral Regulations 2001 that for the next 3 years, including the 2022 local body election and any by-election within that time, if required, the names of the candidates are arranged in random order. I'd like to move that. Seconded, Councillor Christensen. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, Graham. Moving on to item 242, change of meeting dates for 2022. Kaya.
Thank you. It's a very short report, so I'll take it as read. Does anyone have any questions?
It is a short report. No questions. Obviously, elections come in there, which change what happens at the tail end of the year. So, yeah, thank you. No questions. So, our two parts of the resolution is receive the change in meeting dates for 2022 report from Kaya King, Manager Governance is accepted, and confirm in accordance with Clause 19, Part 6, Schedule 7, Local Government 2002, the meeting schedule for 2022 as follows, and that takes our dates through till the 20th of September.
through you, Your Worship, just please note the date of the next ordinary meeting has been pushed out a week, so we should have updates
To the 26th of April, I believe.
But the other one fell in that Easter Anzac kind of period where people are tending to take longer breaks.
Thank you. Good point. Okay, do I have a mover and a seconder for the change of those dates? Do you move, Councillor Ferguson, second Councillor Jeffries, all in favour? Awesome, carried. Thank you. Councillor verbal update. We'll start with you, Councillor Ferguson. Thank you, Kai.
Yeah, thanks, Max. Nice quick meeting. I just like the camera stuff working today, but outside of that, it's just been quite a challenge. We were down to in 3 of our 4 workshops, we were down to 2 staff per workshop on Friday. So COVID is really just hurting businesses, and, you know, the way we operate at the moment. But other than that, nothing else to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Christensen.
No, I've got nothing to report really. I was just going to follow on from what Councillor Ferguson said. I think at least one of our schools in the district is closed. Yeah, so it's, yeah, pretty bad.
Listening out, I believe there's one as well, and there's 2 others who are pretty close to it. Yeah, Councillor Kloss. We need your mic on. Your mic. Thank you.
Karakanui was closed for 10 days. I don't know whether it's gone back yet. But it just seems that it's everywhere. So you just stay away from everything. I actually haven't got anything particularly to talk about.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, attended the council meeting on the 15th of February, obviously. Kawhia Moana Hub Zoom meeting on the 24th of February. And that is an organisation who's been set up out on the coast to deliver support and food parcels to residents right from Kawhia right around to Taharoa. They cover quite a large area. The only unresolved matter that came out of that meeting was what their boundary is. There's still some uncertainty around where their boundary ends and say the likes of the Ōtorohanga or Tikawiti or Te Awamutu boundary starts. So that's still to be resolved. There's some patches of grey area there where people are not sure where they're going to get support and from what direction. Community Board, Kawhia Community Board on the 25th of February. And then we had the pre-meeting discussion by Zoom on the 28th of February for the local government reforms. And then again on the 2nd of March, we had our Zoom meeting with Penny and her team on the future of local government, which was, I thought was a very interesting meeting. And I'm hoping that, that they've got lots of good stuff from us that they can take away with them. So, yeah. I had a couple of other matters that I just wanted to raise. I suppose it's appropriate to do that now, or just we don't have a general business section, though, do we? Yep.
Far away. Within reason.
Within reason, yeah. I've been communicating or talking with Tania about an issue that we had out at the Puri Reserve about freedom campers out in that area, and I don't have a problem with freedom camping, so please don't misunderstand where I'm coming from here, but there is some concerns expressed about some of the people that are camping in that area who are not self-contained. They're living in cars and under tarpaulins, and they're there for days at a time. And there's a concern about their health and safety, and also how they're actually washing themselves and where they're going to the toilet, to put it blunt. So I understand that that area is under the control of Waka Katahi, and that they have, correct me if I'm wrong, Tania, they have pretty much indicated that they're not particularly interested in the problem that we have. But I would like to think that we could continue to lobby them in the meantime, just to keep that concern on the boil with them so that it doesn't get lost. So I'd ask for council support on that one. The other thing I was going to talk about really is the milling that's been happening out at Aotea, and you may have seen that when they were, all the rubbish that's left behind when they mill, they'd actually dumped it, if you like, right on the waterfront, and it's been moved since. But what's the story with the clearing of rubbish once it's been milled? I mean, there's a hell of a mess there on that road to Aotea. They go in and all the rubbish that's left is just, nothing's been done with it. But the one that's been done around by the Puti has been excellent. They've done a great job, and it's as clean as. So I just wondered whether there was different rules for different millers or what it is. So that was a question I had. And the only other one was just to bring you up to date with John Thompson, who was the museum director out there. I've been helping John with some interviews with locals on calf history out there, and we've done 2 so far, and we've got another 4 in the pipeline. And we're using Timo, and we took your advice from Natalie, and we've included a number of her questions as part of what we're giving to them. So that's gone very well, and there's some really interesting stuff coming out of that. So the intention is to have those videos available at the museum so that anyone can see them for posterity, and I think there's going to be edited versions shown on YouTube. So that's all to happen. So yeah, a bit going on out there, but yeah, so that's just a bit of a background. Yeah,
Thank you, Councillor. Good luck with those interviews. And Tanya, you want to talk about forestry up there?
Yes, through you, Your Worship, a reasonably short response, but I understand that if we know that there is milling being done on our roads, then our staff go out and check on the road condition. Believe it or not, we don't always know that milling is going on. And so sometimes we get calls from members of the public saying, hey, my road's turned into something quite different to what it was a week ago. And then we kind of go out on a response basis. But yeah, there doesn't seem to be a kind of a tight process in place for that. But a quick response, but probably Mark or Andreas would be best placed to connect with you. All right, so I'll just make a note of that.
Thank you, Councillor. Thanks, Tanya. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Yeah, it was interesting to be part of that panel discussion, and highlighted for me that the equip corruption and webinar, really interesting. So yeah, if anyone like Kaya sent the link out for it in last Friday's governance letter. So anyway, but yes, certainly take some notes to the Risk and Assurance Committee meeting that is coming up at the end of March with a significant agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Dow.
I've been, what have I done? Community board meeting, then regional transport committee meeting. One of the interesting things out of that was Hamilton City Council put forward a motion they'd like to have 2 councillors on the committee. So at present, every district has their own, just one vote, one person. So that was voted against. So and the guy stormed out of the bloody council office. That didn't get to go on the committee, and then he sent a nasty text to the Waikato District Council's representative there. So it was a bit interesting meeting. Otherwise, they had NZTA Wakatau Tahi talk about their Road to Zero program presented on that. I brought up about the safety routing on the bridge on State Highway 3. They tried to get it off the agenda, but we put it back up in lights again at them, and they tell me that something's going to happen. But keep harping on, I suppose. So that was that meeting. Then they've started another little subcommittee called a Regional Transport Emissions in Waikato District, which is so basically trying to get the emissions, how we're going to go going forward, reducing our emissions footprint for transport in the whole wide area. That was interesting. They had a professor from Palmerston North come and speak. He put up some examples on cost, what it actually costs to get from a person from Palmerston North to Wellington. And funny, well, the likely thing I thought was the electric car that was good on emissions. If you actually started charging road tax on it, it would be dearer to run than a diesel car. But obviously the buses buses and trains were probably the cheapest option is actually a push bike, but that would take about 6 hours, he said. He's actually done it, this guy, so that was kind of interesting. But yeah, it's probably only the second meeting we've had with that committee, so who knows what's going to happen in the future. Otherwise, there's been a lot of disruption around. Everyone said that with COVID, I suppose, it goes without saying. And fuel was becoming a major factor, so I think the price of goods are going to go up, unfortunately. Anyway, that's what it is. So yeah, that's about me. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. We all have faith in you still being the squeaky wheel at the regional and transport meetings, because we will get that rail back on that bridge. Nothing. Yes, Councillor Williams.
Sorry, Your Worship, just interested as to why they think that they can take it off the agenda. Like, do they have a particular reason why they don't see the urgency in addressing that safety rail?
No, it wasn't so much Whakakotahi taking it off. It was the way the Regional Transport Committee decided that because it had been discussed, they would take it off their agenda. So basically we wouldn't talk about it in the committee again, but that sort of means the squeaky wheel's not getting heard. So I had to get a squeaky wheel again and get it back on, which they I was maybe a little bit too direct at Whakakotahi, but anyway, you can watch the YouTube video of me if you want to. But anyway, but it was more of the reporting, like basically, to have a report of actions that have come up, and because it had already come up before, they decided. But we made we didn't actually make a resolution, but we had discussion on it that you couldn't actually take it off the agenda or off that until there was a good outcome or an outcome that everyone's happy with. So it stayed on there until there. So that was what they weren't exactly. Well, they were sort of dismissing it to a certain level, but maybe we're making progress. I don't know. We'll see one day.
Awesome, thank you. Nothing further, councillors? On that note, I'll declare the meeting closed at 11:22. Awesome, now we move into workshops. Thank you, Brendan.